And we're live. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Schumann Brothers Unfiltered. We're joined tonight with one of my friends, Clinton Haby. Clinton, did I pronounce that right?
Yep.
Cool. Make sure I got it. I know there's that little ambiguity, and you're always like, I've known you for years, but I've never actually asked you how to pronounce your name. Clinton resides down in San Antonio and has recently, well, not recently, in the last, 5-10 years, has become self-employed through his pursuits of a career in story keeping, where he goes to people's homes or residences or their companies or wherever it may be. He'll sit down and interview them, much like we're doing to him tonight, so kind of flipping the tables on him a little bit, and talk to them about their lives and capture, that story that they have and get that on video for their descendants to be able to watch in the future years.
Yeah, no, you actually did a pretty nice job of that. I guess it was just last year I celebrated a decade of story keeping. So going on 11 now.
Nice.
It's pretty serious.
And how long have you been doing that as your sole mission? Like, that's the only thing you do?
Yeah, that's it. I've been doing it for going on 11 years. It'll be Cinco de Mayo, just a couple months. It'll be 11 years. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what got you into that? What was it that made you say, this is something I want to do as my sole source of income?
Yeah, well, there's so many different things that go into it. My father has an automotive shop, and he's worked by himself I guess the majority of his career with Haby's Automotive. And, he always told me that you would end up wanting to do your own thing. And, as much as I had worked for other people, I was never totally in control of, the final deliverable to a client. When I worked in sales, I would say, in good faith, what I thought the company would deliver, but ultimately not everything was in my hands. And so it's really demotivating to me when I feel like my word has has kind of been sacrificed. And also I just kind of always knew that this was something that I wanted to do, was to go out on my own, take my future into my own hands. And to be honest, it happened a little bit sooner than I thought that it would. The job that I had in 2009, it was a great job. It was a lot of fun. I was making decent money. I wanted to save up a little bit more before I started story keeping, because I'd had the idea for a while. But the company that I was working for, they were going to sell to a larger company, and ended up getting rid of all kinds of people. It wasn't just me. There was a bunch of people that they got rid of. And, I was doing sales for them. I was at 99% of my quota in the first week of the month. And I was doing great. I was set to make all kinds of bonus. And, if I think if I hadn't been having such a great month, I would have taken that very personally, that they were letting me go. But I knew that I had value. It was just, they kind of accelerated the timeline for me a little bit. As far as why story keeping, I know y'all are going to appreciate this, but, I grew up deer hunting, and it's a huge tradition for my family, and it goes back generations and generations. Even earlier today, I was cutting up, dried deer sausage to stick in the freezer, and it's
Jealous.
It's the same. It's delicious. And, we were organic before organic was cool. And, it's something that our family has always done together. I love my grandparents very much. My grandfather is one heck of a storyteller. And, there was a point in time that I tried to retell one of his classic deer hunting stories to a buddy of mine, and just totally failed, like miserably. All the magic of the first person was lost, and it was then that I had the epiphany. If I don't record my grandfather telling his stories, that it's not going to be there, when he's gone, So yeah, I had the idea for story keeping, and I knew that I eventually wanted to do it, but I always had the comfort of a steady paycheck. And if you work hard at your job, at the end of the day, you're probably tired, you're exhausted, and you don't have the energy to put it into some other hustle, So, when I was let go from that job, and it was like the first week of April 2009, I was let go. It was almost like the clouds parting and the sun shining down upon my face and letting me know, Clinton, now is the time. Like, go and do it. And I'll be honest, it was not gangbusters right out of the gate. I didn't even know what the service would look like. I didn't know how to price it. I didn't know what people were willing to pay for it. And honestly, it's, I tell people today that I'm a filmmaker. Was I a filmmaker back then? No. I had some experience with my family's camcorder in the early 90s, but I had a lot more experience in radio and audio editing because I had worked for Clear Channel Radio, now iHeartRadio, for a few years. But yeah, I mean, when I first started out with story keeping, it was just me, a little digital voice recorder, and my natural talent to get people to be themselves and, speak from the heart. But, it's changed a lot over the past decade to the point that, I'm rolling into people's homes with serious filmmaking gear, really nice cameras and lighting, and, microphones that they use on Hollywood productions. I'm an Aggie. I'm going to push the envelope. I'm going to do the best I can with anything that I've got, So
Ross rolling
Oh
his head
my
over
God.
there.
Oh God, here we go.
It's
It starts already.
I got to bring it hard right out of the gate,
Clinton, that's why we love you. Ross.
That's what those sophomores say to those freshmen.
So Ross, one thing that Clinton got honored with this year, and we actually saw each other recently at Charles's birthday dinner, was he got honored with being a namesake for a fish camp here at A&M. So every year at fish camp, they name each session after somebody, and Clinton had the privilege of being a namesake for one of those camps this year. What color? What color were you, Clinton?
Yeah, we're yellow. Yeah, we're session E yellow.
That's what I was too, man. I was session E yellow. But that was back in 2004.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so much for the interview. We'll just go back to reminiscing.
No, it was just quick little side rant.
I do appreciate the fact, your entrepreneurship story is like a lot of other entrepreneurship stories. You struck out at it. You didn't really know exactly where you were going with it, but you found a niche and you filled it. And yeah, you started out just trying to figure out how to get into it, try to figure out how to make it work. But obviously you were able to take it from something at zero and build it up to something good. And, we see so often nowadays, we're told the American dream is dead, that we're not, that it's not alive, that people can't just make it, that you can't quit your job and go start from scratch and have, I don't know, did you have any investors?
No, it's all me, and I pay cash for everything,
So you struck out on your own after saving up a little bit of money or something, and then you were able to buy the equipment that you needed to buy to get started. Maybe, not like you said, not the equipment you have today. You weren't able to be 100%, amazing. But Kyle did something like this. He kind of did some tailgating stuff where he started out small and he built himself up. I've done this kind of thing. And, although I definitely work for a big company right now, I'm not an entrepreneur. I kind of have a similar story to that. And I wanted to work in oil and gas. And I live near Austin where there's not a lot of oil and gas jobs. And I came up with a philosophy here that there's two ways about it. You can have a good job in a shit place, or you can have a shit job in a good place. So I moved to a shit place and I got a good job. So I now live in Midland, Odessa. And I mean, it literally was my wife and I packing all of our stuff, getting in a U-Haul, driving 8 hours in the hopes that it would work out. So I appreciate that you're coming in. So the question I have to you, when we hear Bernie, Texas is tomorrow, and Bernie's probably going to win the Dem primary. San Antonio, you're down by San Antonio, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of become a Bernie hotspot lately. What do you say to all of those people who are telling us that American dream is dead, that you can't go from nothing and build to something?
Yeah, well, I've had a background in sales, right?
Okay.
And I think that you absolutely have to, number one, believe that it's possible before you can do anything. If you don't believe that it's possible, then you're dead in the water. You're not even going to make an attempt, right? One of the things that I can appreciate about the United States of America and the freedom that we have is that I do have the freedom to strike out and fail or be victorious if I want to, right? Like there's nobody stopping me from doing that. For me with StoryKeeping, it was something where I knew that I loved my family heritage. I knew that I loved where I came from. And I know that I'm not the only person out there that feels that way about their family, right?
Yeah, well, of course. No, that's why we see the Ancestry.com. We see the DNA testing people. We see all these different sites. You're just taking it to a different segment.
Yeah, no, it is totally different. And there's people that are more interested in the the ancestry side of it, the genealogy side, the beginning and the end date, and where did they live at this point in time. And for me, it's more about what is the context there, and what were the values there, and why did you make that decision. It's not about they were born in this city and they died in this city. It's like, well, what the heck happened in between, and how did what happened like in between impact the next generation? Because there's all these people searching today for their identity and who they are and what does this all mean. But really, we are a byproduct of our parents and our grandparents and then the great grandparents. After you get past that, when you get to the second grades, the impact of the family traditions and the values and that sort of thing, it's not as direct. But we are a result of our parents. We can rebel against our parents, but the evidence is there. The foundation is there. So, for me, I grew up in a family, San Antonio, Texas. My dad has his own business. Texas historically has been a very conservative place, right?
Yep.
I don't think we need to be taking direction from any politicians about our own personal direction. Is the key to success in America, I believe, is, understanding, the opportunity that is there for you and creating value and making it so that it would be stupid for other people to not seek you out and to receive the value that you're bringing, right? So obviously we have to play in the theater that, if Trump creates, certain rules and regulations, we're going to have to play within those rules and regulations or, go to jail. If Bernie comes up with something different, that's fine. I know that I'm going to be okay because I know that what I do brings value because my clients love it. My clients love what I create for them. And it's powerful beyond just what my clients love. It's future generations are going to be watching these productions and they're going to learn about themselves. And it's a powerful thing. And that's why I'm not a totally political person. I'm just very focused on making StoryKeeping as good as it can be. I'm sorry, did I answer the question?
Ross, did he?
So The pertinent question there was, what would you say to all of like the Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders supporters right now who are telling us that you can't strike out on your own, that you can't go and just create a business from scratch, that you can't just have an idea and have a passion and follow it? Because we're being told that the American dream is dead, that it no longer exists, that, you know, our grandparents and our parents, they were able to live the American dream. They were able to live this capitalistic dream. But now it's, there's all these big corporations and you can't just start a business and you can't. So, I mean, you literally left your job and went out and started a business, and no investment, your own money. You had something you thought would work out. Now, granted, it was a risk. You took a shot. It could have failed, right? We could have been sitting here talking to you, and you could be living out on the street in Austin looking for a place to camp tonight. But, you know, you took your shot. You made the risk. You made your money. So what do you say to these people who say, well, that's not possible anymore?
I think that, you know, I think there's a ton of factors involved in, you know, when you strike out. You know, like when I struck out, it was 2009. You know, the economy wasn't great at that point in time. Like there are definitely plenty of things stacked against me. You know, here's a news flash for anybody that wants to start a business. You know, if you want to start making money quickly, don't invent a new industry. You know, like don't do that. You know, because there's so much client education and you know, it was such an uphill battle to try and even determine what is story keeping, what am I going to deliver? You know, it's not the best decision in the world, you know, during a recession to do something like that. However, you know, I'm persistent as hell, you know, and if I believe in something, I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to stick by it. You know, I think that there's probably people on the opposite, you know, on the opposite side of the political spectrum that are entrepreneurial as well. You know, I don't buy into the idea that, you know, someone can't start a business today just because there are large corporations out there, you know, dominating what they do. Obviously, me in my third bedroom, I'm not going to start Amazon.com and think that I'm going to, or Amazon2.com, like think I'm going to compete on that level, right?
Jeff Bezos did it out of his garage. I mean, Jeff Bezos started Amazon.com as a damn bookstore. He literally did it out of his garage. Now it's, of course, the biggest company in the world. But I mean, Apple was started in a garage. Microsoft was started at a high school. Facebook was started in a dorm room at Harvard. Yeah. I mean,
you have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. I mean, these guys didn't start. They didn't start here. They started down here and built.
For sure. I mean, and, you know, for every Amazon or Facebook or Google, there's thousands of people that try and, well, MySpace. You know, before I had the job that I got fired from in 2009, I actually helped a friend of mine to, he didn't totally start a library book business, but he bought a library book business from another gentleman that already had built up clientele. And, but the guy's sales process was really weird, and he saw opportunity to bring it online and like make it better. So I was there kind of at the ground stages, and man, what was that? Like 2006 or something like that, of this online bookstore. And it totally ended up failing, you know. Like I worked with my friend for a little bit over a year, and that was kind of like my dry run at, you know, being an entrepreneur. Actually, funny story, sidebar. This was like a really quick like baptism into entrepreneur life. We moved all of this inventory, you know, tens of thousands of books, from Schulenburg, Texas, to a warehouse in San Antonio. And it was so much work that my buddy ended up hiring some temp workers to help us to move all these books and set them up. And, you know, I guess the plumbing in that warehouse, it wasn't set up for so many workers. And so the toilet gets plugged, and, you know, it's me and it's my buddy. And then it's all these temp workers, and who's going to unplug this toilet, and so we did rock, paper, scissors, and I lost. And I said, hey, let's do it a few more times, and I lost again. And one of the very first days, the first week as an entrepreneur, I'm plunging the hell out of a toilet, and it's disgusting, but it's such a perfect example for what you have to be willing to do to take that risk and to put in the work and understand that it begins and ends with you. I don't have sick days, and I don't really have vacation days either. I can be sick and not work. I can take a vacation and not work, but I'm not making any money. When it's me, my business, I'm only getting paid when I'm being productive. So there's a lot of risk in that. But ultimately, people just have to be willing to, number one, believe in what they're doing. Number two, take the risk. And like I said, who cares what any politician says? They're not in charge of you. They're not in control of what you do today or in control of what you do tomorrow. Use that as fuel. If they say it can't be done, use it as fuel. I love it when people say it can't be done. Let's go kick some tail, let's go make it real.
So that's one of the things that I definitely ran into when I started my small business. I'm sure you remember that I had the little tailgating and catering business on the side, and I started that with a few friends. And the biggest hurdle that we had was finding that we found the niche real quick. We were able to find something that was a service related industry, and we gave that personalized service that people crave. It's one thing to be the big company, but it's another thing to be that small company that can give personalized service, and a lot of people really appreciate that. And that's one thing I definitely found out is like if you can spend time and give that individual client their individual time, you're going to have them as a client for a lot longer instead of a massive corporation where they feel kind of just like a client. But if if they feel like they're the client, even if they're not, but if they feel like it, they're going to stick with you, and especially if your prices are competitive. So that was one of the things that we did was we went out and did a lot of analysis and comparisons of different companies that did something similar to us, found a price point that we could live with but was still competitive to our main competition, and then we started doing our service. And we could have made more money, sure, but we felt like at the price point we set, we were making enough money to be successful and grow, but not price gouge people to the point where they wouldn't want to come to us. On your end, what was that process like for you, trying to find that price point that was something that you could live with as a business owner, where you knew it was worth your time, but at the same time, not where your clients weren't going, how much?
Yeah, no, it was really eye-opening when I started to do market research, because I lost my job in 2009. I'm trying to figure out, how in the world do I price this thing? And I ended up coming up with a little bit of a survey, and I emailed it to everybody that I had an email address for. Because back then I was delusional enough to think that everybody on the planet was my client. I still sincerely believe that everybody on the planet has a story, and I think everybody will have a legacy worth capturing. However, not everybody on the planet's going to hire me, So I put it out there, how much back then it was just straight audio. I didn't do the big video productions that I do today. So I was doing straight audio. It was going to be a CD. And I asked people, how much would you be willing to pay for, a CD of, your loved one's stories, right? And I got really low numbers. People are like, oh, it's a CD. I'll pay $10 for that. I'm like, well, I can't make money doing that, so that doesn't make much sense. Really, what I first started out doing, I love Excel documents, and I worked it, how how many projects do I think I can do a week, and what is my hard cost with these CDs, and it was stupid because I didn't really understand my total overhead back then, whereas now I've been in business for almost 11 years, and I know exactly what my overhead is. I know what all of my costs are. I understand that I'm not going to be able to bill for 40 hours every week. I understand that I'm going to be having to do research. I understand there's bookkeeping. There's a lot of different things that a solo business owner has to do to keep things going. And if you don't take that stuff into account, you can work the hell out of yourself and you're not making any of your goals, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm still honing my pricing. I hone my pricing every year, because every year my overhead changes, and every year I'm getting better too. And thank God, I'm so grateful that my clients do love what I'm creating for them, and I'm able to stay busy. I have a healthy backlog right now, and I think if you were to ask another business owner, somebody that believes differently than I do, if you have a healthy backlog, maybe you need to raise your rates, right? Like if you have too much work, you need to raise your rates. I have this ethical thing of, I believe that everybody does have a legacy worth capturing, and I don't want to price out everyone. So what I ended up having to do was put some serious thought into my approach. So, like I was talking about earlier, and almost blew Ross out of the gate with the, Aggies are always going to push it really hard and like do their best, right? So
unless they're on the football field.
Sometimes our best isn't good enough, and we just have to live with it. But
I don't know if you'd say that Georgia game was your best or that LSU game. I'm sorry, if that was your best, we've got major issues.
Yeah. You know what? When you are trying to push your business so hard that your sole focus is on that, I don't have as much time for TexAgs as I used to, and I don't know all the names of all the players and the recruits and everything. It's become secondary, So, but man, I used to sink so much time into recruiting and fighting TexAggie football, and it was one heck of a love-hate relationship. That's me. That was me too, right?
Kyle can tell you every recruit, every high school, the coach, his mother and father, whether his cousin played at A&M. He knows all these details.
I know a lot of it. I don't know that fine of a detail. I'll know like what the player's name is and what position he plays and stuff of that nature, and maybe where he goes to high school. But as far as like his family history, nah.
Well, I mean, I'm sure. Well, it's funny you say the family history, because that actually is important. The coaches should be looking into the family story, right? Because if the coach understands where that player came from, he'll know how to appeal to that player and get even more out of them out there on the field. Because something that I didn't really understand is that we all have what's called an intergenerational self, which it's a psychology term, right? But if you Google it, you'll love it, because when we think about where we came from, we think about our parents and our grandparents. I have family that went through the Great Depression, and that event, the Great Depression, impacts so much of the way that my family thinks. Like my wife makes fun of me because I hang on to cardboard boxes that all my equipment came in, and you're not going to need that. I know I'm not going to need it. I've got socks from when I was in the Corps at A&M that she swears I need to throw away, but I'm like, oh, they're still good socks, It's that kind of mindset where, did I live through the Great Depression? No, I didn't. But am I inspired by my family that, survived it and made things work? Hell yeah, I am. They've been through much worse than I have ever been through. And, if they can make it through that, certainly I can make it through, a recession or something.
Yeah.
I actually have so much opportunity that they never had that it would be straight up disrespectful for me to piss it away.
So you maybe just finally answered my original question by that statement. So you just said that you have more opportunity than your grandparents ever had. Now that's not true for everybody, of course. We all have been born. We've all been born and raised into different situations, right?
True.
Like, Kyle and I, we come from Dime Box, Texas, where we lived on a ranch. We worked with our grandfather. We raised cattle. We did that kind of thing. That was our life. But not everybody's born in the same situation. That doesn't mean that you can't get out of your situation, that you can't better your situation. And I think a thing I've seen I ran for Congress. I don't know if Kyle mentioned that to you. Talking to people, one of the bigger things I always saw was everybody kept telling me, well, the path for me to become a millionaire is not there. Well, maybe the path isn't for you to become a millionaire. Maybe the path is for you to become a 100,000-aire, and then you get your kids a better education than what you got, and then they have then they take the next step. Then they build. We hear all these great immigrant stories where, well, my grandfather came here from Cuba, and he worked in a gas station, blah, 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 XYZ, right?
Yes.
Or my mom was a cook. Whatever. And then now this guy, he's graduated college. He's a software designer because his parents came here. They worked hard and they bettered their situation, which made their kids better. And then their kids worked and they made their situation better, which made their kids better. It's not 0 to 100. Everybody wants to be Jeff Bezos. Everybody wants to be, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, where you go from living in an apartment to being a multi-billionaire. Okay, that's great when it happens, but that's the rarest of the rare occurrences, right? We, like you said, we can name 100,000 failures for every one success. Right. So, like for me and Kyle, our dad worked really hard his entire life, whether we want to admit to it or not. We won't tell him this in person, but we'll admit to it in private. We know he worked hard. We know he tried. We know he did what he could. But now because of what he's done, we have better opportunities than he ever had. Because we now have had opportunities. I work in the oil field. I make a good living. Kyle had an opportunity to go to Texas A&M. I mean, it was a school he could get into. So he went to A&M. He got his education there. We've got better opportunities. And I think that's, when we talk about these kids who are saying, oh, the American dream is dead. It's not dead. It's still alive. You just have to be willing to fight for it. And so you hit a couple big economic points. Number one, you hit economy of scale. You said, look, as I've worked, I've gotten more efficient. That's economy of scale, right? The more and more you do, the more and better you get. Now, there's a point where you'll plateau and you'll either need to bring on another employee or something like that. There's also other things. You talked about pricing. Marketing, pricing, setting price points is extremely difficult when you're doing something that doesn't have a lot of competition. So you entered a niche industry where there's not a ton of competition, right? There's not like 15 other people already doing what you were doing at the time.
You know what's funny? I had no idea that anybody else was out there doing what I was doing. I ended up running across, it was kind of funny. It was a family friend who was basically like a ghostwriter. She would help other people to write their own story, right? So she told me that there was this organization called the Association of Personal Historians, and I had never heard of a personal historian before. Well, as it turns out, it was this organization. Internationally, they had a little bit over 200 members. Not everybody that was in it was actively working. Like, not everybody had their own business. Out of that, the number that did video production or filmmaking like me was very small. There are a lot more writers out there than there were filmmakers. So, right. I mean, the people that are doing what I do, I know a bunch of them, and there's within that segment, we're all very different in our approach. I happen to believe I have the best approach, but of course I would. I was out on like this virtual island inventing it myself, right? Through trial and error. So yeah, everybody thinks that what they do is the best or they wouldn't be doing it,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you're right. It is very difficult to find a price point And I ended up coming up with 3 different levels of production. I have the raw level, I have the standard, and the cinematic. The raw is the very absolute least amount of post production that I can do and still be proud of this work before releasing it. The standard, I'll go through the entirety of the interview. Maybe it's 3 or 4 hours on average. I'll go through the entirety of the interview and I'll chop it up into chapters. So if you think about like a really long conversation, it's not always going to be perfectly chronological. It's not always going to be organized. But I want for future generations to be able to press play on, how did grandpa meet grandma, and like press play. Now they're instantly learning about that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to deliver to clients what I would want, right?
Yeah.
So
well, of course, you want to be proud of what you're doing.
Oh, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then cinematic is like the top of the line, and like not everybody can afford it, but like I want to be able to serve anyone on some level. I'd never want to get away from that. As much as I'm, my equipment is, the most recent camera I got costs more than my car. It doesn't make sense for people to do it on this level on their own. They can't touch me. And anybody else that wants to try to do what I do, they're not going to be able to catch up to me because I'm already 11 years ahead of them. So I'm okay with sharing my knowledge because I know that I'm still pushing really hard. But as hard as I push and as good as I get at what I do, I'm always going to find a way to serve every rung on some level. That means something to me because I think that this is sacred work, what I'm doing.
So what I would call you is I would call you a moral capitalist. So and because we hear all these different terms associated with capitalism, and there is moral capitalism. There are capitalists who, you strive to make a living. You strive to make a profit. And I'm sure you don't want to just barely scrape by. You want to be able to have nice things. You want your work to pay you a reasonable amount. And you want to be able to, go on vacations and buy a nice car and do other things because you've worked hard. You should get those things. But at the same time, you see the value in the human interaction in bettering society as a whole. And I call that, I don't, let's be very clear. I don't call this moral capitalism. I didn't invent the term, but that's called moral capitalism, where you are a capitalist. You are attempting to make money. You don't want government, taking over your business and telling you what you can make and telling you who to do business with. You make a profit, but you're moral about it. You make sure that you're not overcharging people. And of course, we've had crony capitalism. We've had venture capitalism. We've had, bankrupting capitalism, where it's just these guys who come in and bankrupt everybody out. Walmart was that kind of way at first. That was bankruptcy capitalism. They would come in, bankrupt all their competition, and then once their competition was gone, they were out. But that's definitely not the moral way to look at it. So I appreciate that there is a side of capitalism that is morality and does say, okay, we can be decent human beings to each other while still maximizing what we get. But there's also value. You understand who your stakeholders are. You don't have shareholders. You have stakeholders. Your stakeholders are your customers. Because I'm certain, like a lot of small businesses, a lot of your business is word of mouth. A lot of your business is referral. And so if you go and if one customer feels like they're screwed by you, then they're going to tell all of their friends, and that just wiped you out from any of those people. And they're going to tell their friends there. And, it's the old thing that, bad news travels fast and good news travels slow. But I mean, just going back to the economics of it, because I studied economics, and I don't, we didn't get to talk a lot beforehand, but I really love economics. That's what I really like to study. And, when we look at the Austrian School of Economics, is all about looking at how people interact with the market, how individuals, this is where we, start getting more of the individual aspect of the economy, of not just how the market works as a whole, but how does the singular person within the market start to interact? And so, when we talk about pricing, one of the things that's a telltale indicator to business people is we look at elasticity of demand. Mm-hmm. So if I raise my price by $1, how much does the demand go down? Does it go down less than $1? Does it go, So then I know, I would make more money if I raised by $1, or I'd make less money if I raised by $1. And that's really where you find the efficiency in the market. You find that equilibrium where for you, you're making as much money. You're maximizing your profit. Maximizing your profit doesn't mean raising your price to the highest amount, because if you get 0 sales on $1 billion profit margin or $1 billion % profit margin, you still have 0. So your goal is to get as much business at the healthiest profit margin that you can sustain, and then try to maximize it at that level, which it sounds like you, over trial and error for 11 years, have found a decent spot for yourself. You found your equilibrium where you have business, where you have your customers, but yet you have enough work. You're willing to supply it at that point. You've met that equilibrium.
For sure. Yeah, no, and you're right. Like it's been a journey over the past 11 years, kind of honing it and figuring it out. And, I would, if I was charging what I'm charging right now, even 2 years ago, I probably would have found myself with, close to 0 sales, because your clients have to see it, and your clients have to believe it. And if they don't, you're not making jack squat. But, I'm at a point right now where, it's not like I'm ready to retire or something like that. Nowhere close to that. I work very hard, and my wife's job had her working from home, and she always used to have to go into the office, and as soon as she started working from home, she understood how much I work, and because she assumed that I was taking naps all day every day, but that's really not the case. The truth is, no, I'm working all day, and then I work into the night. And when I'm eating lunch, if I don't have a meeting or something like that, or if I'm not filming someone's, either biography or out doing a corporate shoot, I'm watching stuff about filmmaking. I'm learning about lenses or cameras or how I can edit better. It's, because one thing that my dad taught me a long time ago, and, he was talking about Little League Baseball, and me pitching, he's like, if you're resting, the other guy's working, so no, you can't really stop. You can't really rest. So I 2002% believe that all of my clients get an incredible value out of me,
Were you class of 02 at A&M? Is that why you said 2002%?
Yes.
Whoop.
Oh my God.
Squared away, man. I can't get rid of it, So
okay. Well, but no, I agree with you, because my grandpa Kyle, I don't know if you ever, if Grandpa Wimp ever told you that you can't coast downhill until you've climbed uphill.
Yes.
Right. You can't start to coast until you've made the climb. And then the other saying was, and I just like you, every day that you didn't get better, you got worse, because the person behind you got better. So in comparison, you've gotten worse. So I perfectly agree with you. A lot of it's about perseverance. A lot of it's just about getting out there and, not willing to fail, and it sounds like that's a lot of your story, is just unwillingness to really fail, putting yourself in a position to succeed, and then working your tail off and persevering. I'm sure there were several times in 11 years that failure seemed imminent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there were times where, I try to always have multiple projects at different stages happening, just for my own peace of mind. And I'm as faith-filled and optimistic as you will find an individual, right? But still, I want to have, something right on the back burner that I know I can pull in once I wrap up something else. Because if I always need something that I can make progress on, because if I don't, I'm not making money, right? So no, there are plenty of times over the past 11 years where, I didn't know what I was going to work on next. There's nothing on the back burner. Incredibly, thank God, or I hustled enough, or who knows what, but I'm still here, and I'm every year now is my best year ever. 2020 is going to be my best year ever. And it doesn't matter if there's a recession or anything else, and honestly, like what I do, the videography type work that I do, it is a luxury, it's not something that, on the hierarchy of needs or in, the pyramid or whatever, who
Come on,
God knows
Maslow.
where.
Come on, Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Absolutely. I mean, where is your family's legacy in that pyramid? I don't know where it is, but I guarantee you, there's going to be people out there that recognize the value of it. And, no matter what's happening with the economy, if you recognize that, grandma and grandpa, they're downsizing their home, they're moving out of this home that they've lived in for decades. If we're going to capture them as comfortable as they can be in the setting that we've grown up going to, now is the time that we have to do it, right? Like there is a time factor of when it's optimal to do something like story keeping, right? And life doesn't stop because of a stock price, like there's still going to be demand for what I do as long as I keep the quality up, but no, like that kind of stuff, I have faith in it. Actually, you know what, this is interesting. When I first started story keeping, my motto was highlights of a lifetime. And there's two things wrong with that. Number one is of a lifetime kind of implies that, you're supposed to do this thing with me at the end of your life, which is impossible to calculate. Like nobody knows when they're going to go. I got into a head on in 2004. I could have died in 2004. I mean, who knows when we're going to go? You can't time it perfectly. You're never going to get the entire lifetime on video. It's impossible. Number two, highlights. That's me placing myself maybe a little bit too much onto the productions that I'm creating for people, because I was only focused on the good parts in life, the highlights. But something that I learned through time, same thing as pricing, you learn as you go. If somebody is sitting there in front of my camera equipment and they're only talking about the wonderful things that they have achieved in life, but they never talk about any of the challenges, it's not going to mean much to future generations. People aren't going to be inspired by somebody who has had the silver spoon in their mouth their entire lives. What's inspiring for us as Americans is a redemption story. That's what we really align ourselves with, because we can see ourselves at the bottom. And if we can see them at the bottom too, we know that we're made of the same stuff that they are. We can overcome. This is me too. But guess what? Like the same blood that is running through their veins is running through mine. If they can get through the Great Depression, I can crush that ball off of the tee and hit a home run, right? Like if they can do that, I can do this. And it's that intergenerational self. It's that inspiration that's really what I'm delivering to people. It's not just a simple, hit record and hit stop and hand over a file. It's so much more than that. But I had no idea that I was doing that in 2009 when I started it. It's kind of revealed itself through all the clients that I've served, and them letting me know the impact that my work has had, on their family. And, it's that. And then also, of course, I'm always learning, I'm always reading. Anyway, I don't even know what the question was. You got me going on story keeping.
We've done that a few times tonight.
So we do have a question from the audience. You'll probably laugh at this one because it's from someone we both know, from Victor. He goes, "What's the secret to such great hair?"
It depends which hotel you're staying in, how much bounce and fluff you're going to have. I have to be honest. The secret to great hair is having a wife that wants you to have long hair. If my wife didn't want me to have long hair, I would have hair the length of y'all's, because it's a lot easier to manage. But are we about to Okay, yeah, we got some locks going on. All right. Yeah, no,
We gotta get it in before it's gone because it's balding rapidly. So may as well have it long while I have the opportunity.
Yeah, we talked about that on the Friday show.
this is a recurring theme.
Yeah, well, I've been balding for a while. It's not like this is going away.
The joke I made that was actually pretty poignant the other day was that it receded like we were in the Obama years and then stopped once Trump got elected and got back into a good economic times.
My hair grows based on the GDP.
Yeah, we're gonna have to make your hair great again somehow.
Get some keeps.
I was gonna say you know Joe Curry, who is on Stranger Things, the teenage kid. He's kind of modeled his look after you. I think he saw you and he went for that look there.
Yeah, God bless him. You know, it's hard to totally nail the impersonation, but if they want to give it a whack, that's fine. You know, really, my wife likes curly hair. My hair does curl if it's longer. That's the key, Victor. You need a wife that wants you to have curly hair, and if it's not curly, just let it rest right around here, and it will just naturally bounce up. It's going to be nice. Just trust the process.
Yep. So Victor then asked again. He goes, "So what's next for StoryKeeping, and do you have any plans on expanding?" Which I'm gonna assume he maybe means do you have plans on adding any employees, or maybe opening franchises, things like that.
Yeah. So that's something that when I was starting StoryKeeping in the first place, I knew that I didn't just want it to be me, right? But anybody that's watched Shark Tank or any of the business shows, you understand that you have to get the process down in the first place before you can ever expand. Unless your process is tight, expansion is going to blow you up. You really don't want to expand. At the end of 2019, I had a lot of projects that I wanted to wrap up in time for Christmas so that my clients could watch it all together as a family. There's nothing better than getting a picture or a video of, from a client of their entire family. Everybody's watching, grandma and grandpa, just teaching them these things that people have never heard before. It's ridiculous how much time we spend around people and we take for granted that we know everything about them, or if we think we know everything about them, maybe we forgot like all the details of how they met, things like that. We don't know. But I kind of had this epiphany that there's only so much that I can do myself, and if I'm really passionate about what I do with StoryKeeping, and I am, then I don't want to just keep it to myself. Like I need to share this with more people. And I ended up outsourcing a small part of the video editing process at the end of 2019 to 3 different video editors. And I outsourced it wasn't a big chunk of the project. It was basically just enough where it would free me up to do more work myself. And if they totally screwed it up, I'd be able to save it, and the client wouldn't know any different that somebody else had touched the project because I'm the one putting the finishing touches on it. Right. So I know that in 2020, I'm going to be keeping other people busy. And I have worked on the process of outsourcing a little bit of the video editing. But really, when it gets down to it, I'm still a big part of the secret sauce of what makes these things come together. And so there are parts of it that I'm not willing to let go of yet. And something else to think about, when we're talking about, me going out and doing my own thing and I'm making it, right. I understand that not everybody has the same path as me. I went to A&M. I was very involved in in the San Antonio A&M club. I ran that thing in 2013. It was like a 10-year corporate ladder just to become, the president of this alumni club, which sounds ridiculous because it's totally unpaid. But it was an incredible amount of work, but it was also an incredible experience. And my network is huge. Like I know most of the Aggies in San Antonio probably. It's in the thousands, that didn't come for free. I worked for all of that. But, if you're trying to start a business and you don't have a network, you're going to have to create that network yourself while trying to start your business too. And so I understand that being an Aggie for me is a gift, and it also influenced. Sorry, Ross, but it's true, and it's it's also
killing me.
And Kyle brought up Fish Camp too, which is funny because it's everybody that goes into A&M, not everybody goes to Fish Camp, but it's there for everybody if they want to attend. That's where you first get indoctrinated. It's the passing down. There are so many commonalities between the Aggie experience and what I do with StoryKeeping. Like, it's not an accident that I had the idea for StoryKeeping and how I'm so passionate about passing down the traditions from the family. I was trained to do that at A&M, like what does a sophomore say to the freshman, right? Like it's all these different things that add into the culture that provide the value. And if you don't feel that the value is there, if you don't care about the culture, then you're not going to pass it down. For your family, there is culture and there are values, and you're going to want to pass those down to your kids because you're so bought into it, right? So some of those things, if I franchise StoryKeeping, I would be very choosy about who I would franchise to, because not everybody can run a camera and connect with somebody on a deep level at the same time. Not everybody, it's actually very physically demanding to move hundreds of pounds of equipment into somebody's living room and set up essentially a TV movie studio and then tear it down at the end of a day. It's a lot of work, and I don't think it's for everybody. I kind of created my perfect job for myself, and so how many of me can I find, right? I don't know, Victor, start out with growing your hair, and then I can coach you up a little bit. We'll talk.
So Victor did say, like, and I went onto your website earlier tonight and I was looking around trying to get a little show prep in, and I saw that you're doing StoryKeeping for the individual and the family, and now you've actually branched out to doing corporate services. Are there any other services that you plan on expanding to as well, like I don't know, political things or something of that nature? Or I'm just spitballing out here, like, what other services do you think you could see yourself getting into and jumping into and stuff of that nature? And then Victor also laughs at you about the good hair comment.
Well, I don't think it's laughable. I mean, maybe the laughing comes from some insecurity.
I think he was laughing with you,
Victor.
I think he was laughing with you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry I said that, Victor. I love you.
I think I misspoke when I said laughed at you. I said he laughed. So that's what I should have said.
Well, I'll make up with Victor later. It'll be fine. But okay, so what's on trend, right? So with StoryKeeping right now, testimonials are huge right now in the corporate world, because you can't invent a customer experience. If you have a customer that loves the experience that they had with you and they're willing to brag about you, that's pretty good advertising. There's you see ads on TV and it's like, this is a paid actor. It's like, okay, well, I can't trust anything they just said. Or if it's just a straight up advertisement, then okay, understand that you're being influenced by whatever the company wants you to hear. But if you think about it, if you have a good business and you have clients that love you, what would they say if I were interviewing them, right? And so that skill of taking, me rolling into, say, your grandmother's house and setting up this professional camera equipment and lighting and sound. It sounds intimidating, but for whatever reason, I have this innate ability to get people to calm the heck down and be themselves and speak from the heart about what's important to them in front of all of that. So that skill set translates big time into the business world, capturing testimonials from clients. So yeah, I mean, it's like the most effective advertising you can get is just putting a microphone in front of your clients, and also like the way that I film it, with it just being me, the camera is in between me and the person I'm interviewing. It's about as close as you can get to a personal conversation on film that you can get. A lot of, and this is what drives me a little bit nuts about a lot of video that I watch. You're watching an interview, and the cameraman isn't the person doing the interviewing, and they're off to the side. And so you're watching this person talking, and it's totally impersonal, and it's like you're watching somebody else's conversation. Whereas my style, since I'm the one that it's able to do all these things at the same time, you're having the one-on-one conversation. You can see into the person's eyes, and the eyes are the window to the soul. You understand what that person is thinking and what they're feeling just by looking at them. If they're uneasy, or if they don't really believe what they're saying. And so if you get somebody to calm down, be themselves, and then remind them of that experience that they had with your business, I capture gold for you. And so the testimonials are something I'm seeing a lot of right now. And I think there's going to be a lot more of that, especially if, like the coronavirus continues, or if there is a recession, or God knows what, people, I think the business owners are going to be really tuned into what's going to be really effective for me. And I think at the very base level, letting your customers brag about you, it's like word of mouth, but you can actually take it and put it on your social media or website or whatever. I think there's going to be a lot of work for me with testimonial films.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I think what you've done in economic terms, we would call what you do typically a positive good, meaning that when people have more money, they're more likely to come utilize your service, because of course that's like you said, it's not a need. But on the business sense, you would almost be turned a negative good, because testimonials are fairly cheap. You don't really usually have to pay customers to come in and talk good about you. It does have a big impact. So you don't need this massive media campaign. You don't need to shoot this multi-million-dollar commercial. You can just put some people in a room, and for them, it's the cheaper option. So you've created a niche where you're not only a positive good to this market of people, but then you also are at the same time a negative good, to where economically, whether in good or bad times, there's a market for you, regardless of where you're at in the economy.
Yeah, and a lot of people that have historically done the personal historian thing, which I don't really align myself with a personal historian. I'm a filmmaker, and I help people to capture their legacies, right? But people that have done that historically are very focused on, just the family and not the corporate side and not the business side. I came from business. I've done sales. I have that kind of experience, so it's part of me. It's innate. I'm totally at home in it, so it's totally natural for me to make that transition. But, it makes me a little bit more recession proof than people that are trying to do what I do otherwise. No, I agree. It's good.
All right. So I'll take the next question. So being a filmmaker and being an Aggie, and I know I've touched this subject with you in the past, so you probably already know it's coming. We recently saw a movie about the 13th man, the one gentleman who made it out of the bonfire, and you were there, you were actually there the day of or the night of the collapse. Have you given more consideration into making a better produced documentary about the bonfire collapse and the people who survived it, because I did watch The 13th Man, and I came away impressed with it, but at the same time depressed because the producer didn't know what he didn't know the subject matter like you and I would, and he wasn't able to sit down and tell people, hey, you had you misspoke there, or you said something that's inaccurate. Can we get can you go get another take where you're saying the right information? Whereas I feel like with you would do it justice. You would make sure people are on point and they know what they're talking about, and actually are accurate in their details. Is that something that you've considered? Is that something that you're kicking around in the back of your brain, or is that something your wife has told you only once you retire?
I mean, okay, so there's a lot to unpack there in that question, because I did watch The 13th Man, and a lot of times when I watch other people's work, I'm thinking about how I would have done it, right? And like I said earlier, if you don't think that the way that you would have done it would have been better, then you're probably in the wrong industry. You don't really believe in what you're doing, right? I obviously think that I would tell a different story than what he did. But I don't want to take away from his effort either, because I feel like that story deserves all the attention that it can get, and it, we were talking about Fish Camp earlier. I was a counselor in 2001, and the namesakes were the Curleys, and it was Tim Curley's parents. And it was an incredible honor to be a part of that camp and to get to know Tim Curley's parents. They're outstanding people, and they were part of that movie, and so there were individual voices in that movie that were amazing. And then there were some other voices in there where maybe I thought, I know this person that he could have interviewed to bring this perspective, and that would have been better, right? I'm not going to totally dog, someone else's work, especially for an outsider, because he doesn't, like you said, he doesn't know if somebody misspoke or whatever. But that's kind of a thing in my industry anyway. Because when I'm interviewing somebody about their own story, they could tell me something that's false, and I'm not going to know, and I'm not going to fact check it, right? It's their story. They're in control of their narrative. That's their reality, and I let them run with it, That's not my job. It's kind of like the difference between, Ancestry.com and genealogy versus an oral history. An oral history is more of the passed down, tradition, whereas if somebody is really hardcore into genealogy, they're not going to enter any information into Ancestry.com unless they went to that cemetery and they saw the gravesite, or like they went to the records of that county and fact check it, right? So I think there's a lot more leeway in filmmaking for the story and for the emotion and for the feel of it. Have I thought about producing something about bonfire? Yes. Do I think that's in my future? I would say I don't know that I want to put a percentage on it. I know that I want to. I know that right now I'm not able to focus on it at the level that it would need to be focused on, because I already have so much work that I'm working on. I need to perfect my system of being able to trust other people to execute, to free up my time enough, and to have enough revenue coming in where I can divert it to something that may or may not make me any money whatsoever. The fastest way to getting me to produce a bonfire focused film would be for someone that really cares about it to sponsor it, right? Because if there's money attached to it, that buys time for me to invest into making it amazing. I'm not independently wealthy, so I can't fund the project myself. Do I think that there are Aggies out there that would have funding, that they would love to see something a little bit more, pro A&M, pro bonfire type angle to tell that story? I imagine there would be, I'm not soliciting them right now, but if somebody wants to partner up with me on it, then we'll see where we can take it. But there are so many incredible stories surrounding Bonfire, not just in the collapse, but Bonfire in general. Really, even just student Bonfire today, and how hard those students work just to make it possible is an incredible story. So I mean, my hat's off to them. There's so much potential there for it, which is why I feel like eventually I will do something in that arena, though it's not something I'm pursuing right now in this moment. So
all right, well, that sounds good. So we're at the hour 10 mark, and we told you anywhere from 30 minutes to 90. So if you've got obligations you need to run off to, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to keep peppering you with questions.
Okay, no, I can hang in a little bit longer.
Okay, cool. So sorry about that. So I know, like what y'all were talking about earlier with the the Great Depression and our grandparents. For me, that resonates because Ross and I were lucky enough to have not one but two great grandmothers alive when we were born, and lived with we lived in and around them and spent time with them as we grew up. And both of those ladies had grown up, and great grandfathers as well. Both of those couples had grown up throughout the Great Depression, and I know for me, like my wife gets on me every time she sees me eating chicken wings. She'll yell at me like, "Why are you eating them all the way down to the bone?" I'm like, "Well, because there's plenty of meat there still, and that's how I was raised. You don't waste food. Going dove hunting growing up, if I went, Ross is holding up a chicken wing that he's eating bear as well.
Now get your money's worth.
Exactly. I mean, chicken wings are already way more expensive than they should be the way it is. But growing up, we went dove hunting and we clean the bird and bring it in to be cooked. I remember very distinctly one time my great grandmother Dismukes, looked at the bird clean, very good, very well clean. She goes, "Well, that's the way to clean it, but where's the rest of it?" And I go, "What do you mean?" And then she goes, "You forgot the good parts." And then she whooped my ass and sent me back outside to the gut pile to pick out all the hearts, livers, and the gizzards, because she was going to make gravy or fried hearts or whatever it may be with those organs, because those were edible and good. And that's to this day I still like, even go to Chicken Express, I'll still order chicken gizzards because I grew up eating those and I've got the affinity for it. So my wife also goes, "Why would you eat that?" It's like, because it's good. It's delicious. But that's definitely something that if it wouldn't have been for them teaching me that and showing us how to take advantage of every little aspect that we could, I would have never done that. And then I parlayed that into my business when I started it, repurposing things that were leftovers or trash or whatever it may be, and figuring out ways to use them and make them into something that's a viable product for me that my customers will get a benefit out of. We were having all these issues with tents blowing away. Well, figured out a way to take the tents that had broken and repurpose them into other things, and we just it parlayed into that aspect of my life. And it also gave me that ability to go out and talk to people, because my dad has started the quail hunting business that we've talked about often. And one of the things that we definitely learned while guiding for him is that everyone's favorite subject is themselves. So if you sit down and talk to them and you just start asking them questions about where they're from, what they do, how many kids they have, you can get them into a 30-40 minute conversation without even really trying, because they're just going to sit there and tell you about themselves, because that's their favorite subject to talk about. So with you as being an interviewer, what strategy do you employ to ensure that you're getting the best stories out of your customers? Are there any set questions you always ask? And is there some things that just as you're talking to them, you're like, "Oh, that I got to ask them about this"?
It's that in itself is a great question. That's something that separates me from some of my colleagues. Is I don't have a set list of questions that I ask, because my core belief is that if you ask a question that kind of influences what you're going to get back, right? When I'm interviewing these people, I'm totally focused on them and what's important to them. And so if I'm going in there and I'm applying the same questions to everyone, I'm not going to get the full story from them. So the real key is, number one, for me to establish a mutual trust right out of the gate, and to let them know that, you know what, I don't look like a member of your family, but for the next 3 or 4 hours, I embody your future family. You know, you're not talking to me, you're talking to your descendants now. And I want the full story, you know. I don't want to ask a question that's where they could possibly leave something out that's really valuable, that might be integral to their legacy and their challenge and their victory, right? And because I have that approach in the interview style, I end up uncovering things that, you know, the person that I'm interviewing hasn't thought about and hasn't talked about in decades. Like I interviewed a couple a few years ago, and they're celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary together. And, you know, I'm interviewing the two of them, and I'm using my process that I always use. And the husband looks over at the wife. He's like, I didn't know that about you. And I'm like, holy cow. You know, like, these people have been married for 60 years. They've known each other over 60 years. They spend every day together. I've been here for, you know, a couple hours, and we've unearthed some things that we don't know about the other person. I'm not going to go into something already assuming what their story is, because that's a disservice to their actual story. And as that process goes on, we develop what I call mental momentum. And, you know, as the brain is firing, and you know, the synapses are connecting, these roads, these highways are being formed to different areas of the brain that start being accessed, that haven't been accessed in a long time. And it all starts with just being present and engaged, and letting them know that I sincerely care about who they are, and I am sincerely interested in what makes them who they are. And, you know, you talking about everybody's perfect, you know, favorite subject being themselves. That's true. When you pair that with an intense curiosity, people aren't used to that. And it's a very energizing experience for people. You know, I did some work for the Cancer Therapy and Research Center here in San Antonio, and the director told me, hey, you know what you're doing, right? And I was like, yeah, story keeping. I made it up. And she was like, well, no, you're doing dignity therapy. And, you know, as it turns out, very similar to my own interview process, legitimate doctors will walk their patients through the story of their life, starting with early memories up to the present day. And, you know, the byproduct of that therapy is they have a renewed sense of purpose, and they understand the value of their life and who they are. And, oh my God, I have something to live for, you know. It's a byproduct of my process that I never imagined, you know, but it's something that I see in all the interviews that I do. So, you know, when I go into an interview, I understand, you know, Ross, you're talking about different stakeholders, right? I have multiple stakeholders. I've got the storyteller, you know, the person whose story I'm capturing. I have their kids or whoever it is that actually hired me, that's paying for it. And then I have future generations of their family who are also going to be invested in this, you know. And so it's important to me that I deliver for each of those stakeholders. So before I go into an interview, I let my client know, hey, if there's a super specific story that you know you want captured on film, let me know in advance. I'll work it into the conversation. Otherwise, we're going to go through this process and it's going to be amazing. You're going to love what we capture, even if you don't tell me anything specific. But I want to stay accountable to my clients and deliver on expectations. I want to exceed the expectations, but I want to at least deliver on what they're expecting. So as far as the questions go, I don't have a question list, but if a client really has something specific, like the time that they rode the red wagon down the hill and, like the wheels fell off and they hurt their head, something that could possibly be overlooked.
The time your brother threw a brick at you and hit you in the chest.
We literally rode a red wagon down a hill and the wheels came off with our little brother in it. It literally happened.
State shoot. I remember that.
State shoot.
Down in San Antonio, of all places.
That's funny. Well.
He slammed into a ditch.
So what did y'all learn from that, right?
Get better wheels.
Don't tell Mom. Don't tell Mom her 4-year-old just slammed into a ditch.
Get reinforced wheels on your wagon.
Well, no, this is explaining a lot.
Oh, God. That was funny. You said that. I was like, I just started laughing because it was like, oh, well, that story rings true. Kyle and I have lots of those stories where we can talk about how the other one, Kyle has an affinity for walking out of horse trailers and not ducking. Many concussions have ensued. I just tend to hurt myself. You can probably hear this here.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, that's just my nug. I can do it with both hands.
Yeah, so ambidextrous, very good.
And I can pop my jaw really well because some jackass. So probably about the first point in our lives where I was actually big enough that I could pin Kyle in a wrestling match. Kyle had tapped out, so I got off of him, and he punched me from behind in the jaw.
Hey, punch you? I came up and put you in a choke lock.
No. Bullshit. You punched me from behind in the jaw.
Think about the
We were by the cabin. We had just Yes. I was getting up. I was walking away. You got up behind me. You swung. You made contact right here from behind me. I was like, I don't know, maybe chewing. And I snapped a little piece of my jaw. And now my jaw clicks and locks up every now and then. Thanks, jackass.
You're welcome. I maintain I was putting you in a choke lock.
But Kyle has some rather good stories about, I threw a brick at him. I threw him into a tree. Other various ways I've tried to kill him. And he's tried to kill me, vice versa. So, I guess, I do want to, unfortunately, I'm going to have to get ready to go here. I've actually just got a call or got a text that I got to go do some work. But, I did want to ask just a couple more questions just to kind of, so, like I said, I love the business side of things. I love economics. I have an MBA. I have a PMP. So, that's kind of my world is where I come from there. And you talk about stakeholders. You talk about stakeholder management. It's a big part of project management. And, a large part of stakeholder identification is it's not just the people that you're working with. It's the people who are going to be affected. A large portion of why we saw these lawsuits back in the day is because these companies didn't consider how other people would be affected by their decision. Oh, I'm dumping this chemical on this ground. This farmer, I pay him for his land so I can dump chemical on his ground. Well, that's not the only stakeholder, right? Because that chemical seeps into the dirt. It gets into the water table. That water table affects thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So we have to consider all of our stakeholders. We have to consider everybody that's a part of this and not just who is directly being – and when I talk economics, the number one thing I know about economics is that most Americans studied microeconomics and not macroeconomics. And that when they look at an economic structure, they're looking about how the market affects them, not how the market affects society as a whole. The other thing about it is in micro, you're much more worried about the short-term ramification of an economic decision. In macroeconomics, you're much more worried about the long-term ramifications. And so there you start really studying externalities. And externalities are those, okay, I make this decision. The Fed lowers the interest rate by 0.25%. Okay, what does that do? Well, that injects more money into the economy because people will be more likely to take out loans and yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. But what else does that do, right? Because that's going to affect down the road other things. So when you're talking about your stakeholders, you're talking about the externalities, it's very interesting to me. What would you say is, for you, because you did mention that this is a job that you created for yourself. Yes. And of course, what's the old saying? If you find a job you're passionate about, you'll never work another day in your life. So for you, when I'm sure you've had customers who unfortunately have done your service fairly close to the end of their life. Mm-hmm. Has there ever been a moment when a grandson, a granddaughter, somebody has come back to you to show you their appreciation for your service? And what was the impact of that for you?
No, I mean, I kind of in passing said it before, but I absolutely believe that the work that I do is sacred. Mm-hmm. I think that, within each of us, we have a soul, and what I'm doing is basically getting people to expose their soul to me, but it's not just me that's receiving it. It's, I'm capturing it, through film and through the audio. And it's if I'm doing my work the way that I'm supposed to be doing it, then you're going to feel like when you're watching it back that you're sitting there in their living room with them having that conversation, because I'm taking myself out of it in post-production as much as I can. Right. So yeah, I mean, I just celebrated 10 years in business. And so my wife told me, you know what, like, this is a big deal. You need to have a party. And I'm like, well, StoryKeeping isn't really a party brand. Like we're not like a crazy wild party brand. But she was like, no, 10 years in business is a big deal. We're going to have a party. Yeah. We're going to celebrate. So yeah, I mean, we had a decade of StoryKeeping party. And it was incredible to me how many of my clients showed up and how many of their family members showed up. It turned into a shindig, and, I'm a filmmaker. I'm also good at taking photos. I thought, maybe I'll bring my camera along. I'll take some pictures of the party. My wife was like, no, you need to be there for your clients to interact with them. I'm like, okay. So I ended up hiring a friend of mine, a fellow photographer, to take pictures at the event.
Tom.
And what was that? I'm sorry.
Tom Campbell.
No.
Okay.
If he was in San Antonio, I probably would have pulled him in. But no, it was my buddy Ramsey, and he pulled his wife Becca into it. They did an outstanding job, but it was hilarious because I don't know any different, right? This is my world, and this is everything that I see. You kind of create your own world, your own little echo chamber, right? I created a StoryKeeping echo chamber. So my buddy, who was not a part of my little StoryKeeping echo chamber, was like, man, everybody there loves you. And I was like, cool. But they don't love me because, hey, we're throwing a party. They love me because, if they hired me to interview their parents and I got their dad to talk on camera when he doesn't talk to anybody, it's a freaking miracle to them. Ross, you mentioned, the Cubans before. I interviewed a family that escaped from Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro totally took everything that they had away from them. They had to they had to leave their lives behind and get on a boat to come to the United States of America. And they are the most patriotic family you will ever find in your life because they know what we have. They know what we have here, right? And so, for me to have interviewed her parents and to capture that story is priceless for their family, because hopefully never again in the story of their family will they ever have to escape something like that again. Never will they experience that kind of hardship of losing everything that you have and having to start from the bottom all over again. Never again. So no matter what, future generations are going to know where they came from, and that that is priceless. As soon as somebody dies, the value of their stories skyrockets because you can't get it. There's a limited amount of time. And so for the people where what you were talking about before, I'm sure you've interviewed people that were near the end of their life. I have. And, in those scenarios, I'll put off other work to schedule that interview time as soon, like even it's totally inconvenient for me. I knock it out as soon as I can because I know that time is precious. I learned, it was maybe the second year I was in business. I scheduled an interview when it was convenient for me. And the guy I was supposed to interview had an aneurysm 2 days before the interview. He went into the hospital. I talked to his daughter. She said, you know what? He's had an aneurysm. He's in the hospital. When he gets out, we'll do it immediately. He never came out of the hospital, right? Like, and that I feel so much guilt over that because it was my own schedule that deprived that family of all of that wealth of knowledge that lives right here, but it's only accessible for a certain amount of time. And I talking about being the moral capitalist, I could totally play on that in my marketing, right?
Yeah.
But I don't. I refuse to. People have to get it themselves.
Which makes you even more of a moral capitalist than.
Yeah, because you could definitely charge an expedition fee, right? Oh, well, I'm having to expedite my work, so you have to pay to jump the line, but because you're not doing that again. I think for me, I wish we would see, I think we do see more of this nowadays because I think we hold companies to it at this point that if they're not acting morally, there's enough with social media, with Twitter, that we can, enough people go on and say, hey, at AT&T, you screwed me, whatever company, and people hold them to an account. And so, that helps us make a more moral version of capitalism. Now, profit margins suffer a little bit under moral capitalism, but the society gains under moral capitalism.
Well, it's okay. So there's a short-term game. There's a long-term game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing long-term.
Yeah.
I want StoryKeeping to survive well past me, and in order to do that, like you said, the bad news travels so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
You can lose your reputation, like bam. And I, my wife, it always comes back to my wife from the hair to lying. I refuse to lie because I'm not good at it, and because it doesn't sit well with me, right? Which, to hear somebody say like, "Oh, I don't lie," well, obviously I'm lying, right? But it's just this thing where I understand that it is a small world, and it's all going to come back around, and you never know when somebody that maybe pointed one finger at you in traffic, you're going to be in line next to him at the grocery store the next day. Like, you can't live that way. It's not in your personal best interest, and it's definitely not in the best interest of the people around you. So just operating with that also helps me to quickly establish a mutual trust with the people that I'm interviewing, because I think that people can kind of pick up on it. It's almost like animals or pets. This is reminding me, who was it? There was like a guy doing a job interview, or there's like a politician being interviewed, and like his kid comes in the background.
Yeah, well, when you have 5 of them,
yeah, okay,
it tends to happen quite often. But that was in Britain. The guy was actually on he was on BBC One doing the nightly nightcast. If you go on YouTube, because BBC is publicly owned in the UK, you can watch every episode of any BBC show you want on YouTube. There's no copyright laws because it's owned by the people. So they can rebroadcast it on YouTube. So I watch a ton of British television because of this, because I'm a cord cutter. I don't have television in my home. So There's really good comedy programs in Britain. Now, I'm not talking about the old British comedy where it's like, Benny Hill, run through one room, come out in another. This is, like Jimmy Carr and other really good comics that we know here in the U.S. James Corden. You can watch a lot of James Corden stuff from back in the day. That's really good TV, but it's free. And you can just go on YouTube and you can watch season after season after season. And I will tell you this, some of the stuff they get away with saying on live broadcast television, if you said it here, you'd be Me Too'd in a second. What some of these people say.
So I've never watched any of it, so I wouldn't know. But I'm a Netflix and watch my own productions kind of guy.
Yeah, same. So we do have one, and it kind of goes back to one of the things you said earlier, and it does. One of the questions from the audience is, have you ever had an unhappy customer? I'm assuming that the customer whose father died before you could get interviewed probably wasn't happy. They may have they're probably understanding, but they probably weren't happy. Have you ever had like a truly unhappy customer after a production was made? They're like, oh, this was horrible. You ruined everything. We can't believe you had this horrible production, something of that nature.
And to piggyback on that, was there anybody who was upset because they thought there was going to be better stories than what they got?
No one has ever been upset with the quality of stories. My storytellers are amazing. And it's not because, everybody is a masterful storyteller. It's that, if you have lived life, you've got something legitimate to say. The unhappiest that I had a client was the second client that I had, which I'm so grateful that it happened so early on. But at that point in time, I didn't have all my processes in order because I was still trying to figure it all out. The reason that they were upset is because, I had quoted them, however much for like a 3 or 4 hour long interview and however many CDs. And, they had hired me to interview their great aunt. And this great aunt, when I was interviewing her, had so many more stories and so much more to share than what anyone had anticipated. And so instead of a 3 or 4 hour long interview, it was more like 6 hours. Right. And so I think I ended up charging him for like 5. And, but even though I didn't charge him for like all the time that I had in it, it was more than what the expectation was. And so I learned very early on that you have to set the expectations up front and deliver on those expectations. Otherwise, they had sticker shock, which is goofy when I look back on it now, because, their entire thing ended up being like $350 or something like that, which it doesn't get you much in $20, but for them, it was more than what they thought. It wasn't so much more that they told me. They told their son, who then told me, because I was friends with their son. He was like, hey, just so you know, they were kind of shocked by the price. I'm like, what? I thought I was totally reasonable, and I was, but going into things now, I understand that, I have the money conversation up front. We set a time limit on how long we're going to interview, and then more often than not, I over deliver anyway. And so people are always really pleased with what I do now, because, you under promise and you over deliver. But I didn't have that figured out at first. I had to learn the hard way. So
okay.
Since then, nobody's upset.
At least that you know of.
They haven't told me, but no, more often than not, and my wife makes fun of me for it, I'll send them the link so that they can watch the production, and I'll just be like watching the phone, like waiting for them to respond. Like if you see red, I'm like, oh, they got the link. Okay. The link is however many minutes long. They should be responding any second now, and I want that validation because I'm so invested in the work, But no, people love what I create. I'm really fortunate that way.
Ross, do you have any follow-up questions or any last questions for Clinton?
Well, I mean, I think, God, I mean, it's such a niche industry that there's all kinds of questions you could ask because, of course, it's an industry I've never participated in. It's an industry I've never been a part of. It's an industry and I think that's the great part of it. I want to take it back for me to the economic sense because it is that, because you've found a market for something you love to do, and then you took that and you made a way to monetize it, to profit off of it, while still maintaining a social fabric, while still prioritizing your community and ensuring that your customers are happy. Now, of course, again, unhappy customers means no more customers, right? So if Jeff Bezos came out of his garage and pissed everybody off, Jeff Bezos would still be in his garage, right? And his ex-wife wouldn't have $30 billion. So that's just some of those things where it's, I appreciate the fact that what you did was take something. Because I think all of us who are entrepreneurially minded, I think Kyle and I, we both come from families where it was always, what can we do to make extra money, right? Our grandfather raised cattle and he harvested pecans and he drove a school bus and he baled hay and he set up irrigation systems and he fixed tractors and he did all this other stuff, right? There was always the next thing that he was doing. There was always that hard work. It was hard work, right? It's always about the ethic, about getting out there and just be willing to work harder than anybody else. I try to bring that to my job now, where I tell my boss, look, I don't care what time of night. I don't care what time of day. You call me. I'm not doing something. I'm on my way. I'll take care of it for you, because I get a bonus for going to the field. So I want as many of those bonuses as I can get, right? I'm selfish. I want to make as much of that as I can. I want as much money as I can possibly get. So that means that I have to be the first guy they call, because they know I'll take care of them. They know I'll make it work for them. And so it's really about, well, the question I asked at first was about the Bernie bros, about the Elizabeth Warren people who think, you know what, that it's not about hard work. It's not about this. It's about, luck. Well, granted, there's luck involved, right? Jeff Bezos, there was some luck involved, right? Steve Jobs, there was some luck involved there, but a lot of it was perseverance. A lot of it was work ethic. Just, we hear the stories about Steve Jobs and that he was a jerk, right? That he just, he would tell people it wasn't good enough and he would throw them out of the room and tell them to come back and get it worked. But he was a perfectionist and he worked hard, and he had that ethic that where he didn't accept less from somebody else, which is, you spoke about earlier, it's hard to give up any amount of control, because then maybe the quality suffers, or maybe, now to make it big in business, eventually life goes on, right? You have to give up some amount of control, or at least give up the control of the things you don't like doing, that you're not as worried about, the bookkeeping, the financial stuff. Right. Other things, right? Last man standing, we'll do the things you like to do and hire people to do the things you don't like to do. I was like, you know what? That's good business sense from Tim Allen, which I don't know if you guys remember. I just found this out. Tim Allen went to jail for cocaine possession. Yep. Never knew that.
Yeah.
Never knew that.
I knew that.
Back in the late 80s. Yeah. I was reading his Wikipedia page. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, he was a comedian in the truest sense of the words. He definitely partook and got caught.
Late 80s comedian. Anyway, so back to the point here is that from the economic standpoint of what you were able to do, what you were able to create. For me, what I want any of our listeners to take away from this, who see this after the fact, who are not live streaming it, or who are watching it right now, is that the American dream is still alive, right? It takes risk. It takes luck. It takes perseverance. All those things are true. It's not easy, right? But everything that's worth doing has never been easy. Nobody's ever handed anybody $1 billion. And what we know from looking at lottery winners, I love pointing this out. Lottery winners tend to go bankrupt pretty quick because they don't understand how to spend the money. They think they can just buy everything. They think the money will never end, and it does. And it does very quickly. And we see 35% of lottery winners end up committing suicide due to financial reasons. So working for something, earning it is always going to be more valuable to you when you've had to put blood, sweat, and tears into it. And I appreciate that you have done that you have taken that personal risk, that you have put yourself out there, and that you can shine an example to other people, and hopefully some more of them in San Antonio, because boy, they vote blue in San Antonio like nobody's business. And that is something where these guys can take away that, that American dream that we all have come to grow up with and love and cherish is still alive and is still well. And actually, maybe today might be the easiest time to actually access that dream due to our access to the internet, access to credit, other things. So thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I think that really helps us, talking to those people and being able to point that out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, that's part of the American dream, right? Is to work hard, provide a better opportunity for the next generation, like you were talking about in your family, and yeah, hopefully something that I've done in my life will show somebody else that there's a way, and. Mm-hmm. It's something that you touched on with, people voting blue or red and that sort of thing. I don't think that Americans are as 50-50 divided as what people might want you to believe. It's not everybody completely subscribes to everything for one party or another. There's people in this upcoming election that will vote blue just because they want the female example, right? Like there will be people that vote for Elizabeth Warren because they want, their daughters to see that it is possible for a woman to become president, right? Mm-hmm. That's not something that's like communicated like on the news so much, right? It's more of, this is your package of ideas, and fight. It's Americans think more than that, and we're more complicated than that. But I on the fringe, no. But there's a lot of people out there that, one of my favorite quotes is, if everybody's thinking the same way, nobody's thinking at all, right? I've always tried to put my shoes on, or put my feet in somebody else's shoes and understand how in the world did they come up with this worldview. I am intensely curious. That's what makes me good at what I do, right? And so yeah, I don't know. Like if somebody takes something away from my body of work through story keeping, then let it be. Everybody does have their own story. Everybody does have their own legacy, and it is important, and it's worth passing down, because you never know what you experience today, what a future generation of your family is going to latch onto and find inspiration in. Because the same kind of stuff of the red wagon going down the hill and the wheels flying off and people getting hurt, that's playing in every generation. You sit next to a 90-year-old guy and you think you have nothing in common with him. Listen to him. Mm-hmm. Find out. History repeats itself. There's nothing new under the sun. Like that's what it is, Okay,
so my follow-up, my last question, and Ross, that was your last question. I don't care what you say. My last question is that you're a professional interviewer, and we're starting out in this game, and we're trying to make our little niche in it, and we've made some success. We've had, we're having you on. We've had a couple other people on that we feel are very, we were punching out of our league to get on the show, and we appreciate each and every person that comes on, and don't get me wrong, we greatly appreciate you. But since you are that professional interviewer, could you give us one or two tips that you think could help us in our career path going forward? Because, we do our interviews and then we do our own show. We haven't been doing our own show because of how successful we have been in getting interviews, but we will do our own shows when we don't get interviews, and we'll do interviews as they come to fruition. So what's one or two things that you would recommend for us to work on to become better interviewers?
So I've totally been present for this interview, and so I have not been critiquing y'all at all. Like throughout this thing, I'd have to like watch it back to give y'all like constructive criticism. But I will share with y'all what I would tell anyone, right? And that's to, number one, approach people from a place of love and respect, because people can sense that right out of the gate. Number two, be present, because there's so many conversations happening across the world where everybody's thinking of what they can say next, right? And I think that people end up missing out on a lot because they're not tuned in. In the same vein that everybody's favorite subject is themselves. People love to hear themselves talk. People love to sound smart and impressive with the very next thing that they say. And so you're formulating what you're going to say while that person is still expressing themselves. And if you are doing that, then you're totally missing out on some of the very best content that you could be actually exposing and bringing out of people. So yeah, just totally be in love with the person that you're interviewing, hang on their every word, and reflect back to them. And if you feel like there's a hole, ask them to fill it, because you want to get the full story. That's what I do. It's that simple, and it brings out the absolute best in people, and people will love you for it. So that's my interviewing tips.
Well, those are definitely greatly appreciated. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Like I said, greatly appreciate you coming on. Don't want to monopolize any more of your time than we already have. If someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you to potentially book you, or just get a hold of you and talk to you about the process?
Yeah, you can email me at info@storykeeping.com, or just go to facebook.com/storykeeping. Send me a message there. It's StoryKeeping. It's all one word. There is the ing at the end. But yeah, just, facebook.com/storykeeping or info@storykeeping.com. And yeah, no, I'd love to create something amazing for anybody who's watching this. So
if you were truly a good Aggie, it would just be the IN at the end. You would have dropped the G, because it's not
StoryKeeping.
It's not the fighting Texas Aggies. It's the fight in Texas Aggies. Just throwing my 2 cents in here.
Yeah, no, I mean, if I'm smart, then I buy that URL as well, right? StoryKeeping.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Right. No, and lastly, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. Any opportunity for someone to speak about what they have going on, if they're passionate about it, they're going to be appreciative for that opportunity. So thanks for what y'all are doing.
So again, thank you so much for showing up. To all of the listeners who've gotten to listen to this, who have spent the time listening to this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the notification bell. Make sure you select all notifications so that you know when we're live streaming. You know when we're putting new content out there. Kyle and I are getting more and more into doing these interviews. Clinton, we want to thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you so much for letting us just pepper you with different questions and talk about just so many different things, or whether it be your job, whether it be Aggie stuff, whether it be whatever else. We appreciate the time, because we know that it took time out of your day to do so. Again, for all of our listeners, thank you so much for paying attention. Thank you so much for spending this time for you. For all of our live listeners, we did have, I think, up to 6 today. So thank you guys so much for coming out. And you know what? We appreciate every one of you and the time you're spending. Make sure you're letting us know what you like about us, what you don't like, so that we can continue to grow and continue to get better. And then for that, I'll say what Kyle normally says, since you're Mr. Aggie. Gig 'em and God bless.
Thanks, and gig 'em.
Gig 'em and God bless. You can find me on Twitter at @KyleSchumann08. I did change my Twitter handle.
Finally.
Yeah. after finally figuring out, that Outlaw FTT 08 was just so hard to say. So got myself a little bit more professional, and moving forward, that'll be what I go with, Kyle Schumann 08. Ross can be found at Ross Schumann, and if you can coax him onto Twitter, it's at Haby2002. He doesn't respond much or tweet much, but he is there. I confirmed it is a active profile earlier today, but just not a whole lot there. He's mostly on Facebook and mostly on StoryKeeping.com or Facebook.com/StoryKeeping and StoryKeeping.com as well. Clinton, like I said, we've said many times before, it's great. Greatly thank you so much, and I appreciate you, and I hope you have a great night. Gig 'em and God bless.
Yeah, my pleasure, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Good night.